questions today. And the first one is, if you could take a snapshot of the worst moment, not of the abuse itself, but a moment during your childhood when the realization hit you, what would that look like?
Very good.
As young girls, as babies, I mean, mine started at age 3. We didn't know what that was. It was being done to us. We didn't know what sexual abuse was. We just knew that we felt something was wrong.
Right.
Something was not right. Mm-hmm. Then when you get older, when you become 8, 9, 10, then you start feeling dirty. Mm-hmm. You start feeling guilty. Mm-hmm. You start feeling worthless, like you said. It's all of these feelings. You don't, as an adult, you have trouble with these feelings. How do we as a child? How do we handle those feelings? And as the feelings that you have from being a child of a father who abused you sexually, physically, mentally, verbally, and your mother allowed it, when you grow up, you still have all those because you had never dealt with any of those feelings as a child. So when you go in, and I was married at age 18, so all of that still went with me. So I felt when my husband would say, "I love you," I'm like, how? Why? I don't love me. How can you? Mm-hmm. So you had those, I don't know how anybody can love me. I am worthless. I'm dumb. I was told I was dumb, stupid, worthless. So when you take all those into your adulthood, and you are now thrown into with all these feelings that you never even be able to tell anyone.
The abuse that I went through as a child, impacted me, especially in high school. I wore a mask through that like a champ. Nobody knew what happened. Nobody knew what was going on. And one of my friends told me even a couple years later, just a couple years ago, she was like, "Oh, I always wanted to be like you. You had such this confidence in you and stuff." And I'm like, "Are you really?" I'm just like, who are you talking about? That was me and my mask. So apparently I played it very well.
Pretending.
But yeah, exactly. The pretending is easy.
Secret.
And so once I started dealing with it, though, that mask came down. Mm-hmm. And that's when my anxiety, my depression, the racing thoughts, the, indecisiveness, that's when that came in.
Again, Christina mentioned, a mask. I became very good at just shutting down. And my mask was stoic. And if I did let anything out or show through, it was anger. That was much easier for me to put out there. I wasn't going to let anybody hurt me again, and I wasn't going to let anybody close enough to me to hurt me again. And again, that's kind of my default mode even today.
Because I think with Bella, the first month, I didn't want to change her diaper. I was like, "What is this? Am I going to be some weirdo pedophile too? And I'm going to want to do that to my child?" But I was able to understand the difference. This was something that happened to my dad. This was something that happened to me, and I'm breaking the cycle. I'm the one stopping it. And I made sure that I made that conscious choice every day, whether I felt the urge or whatever or not. But I just couldn't see how somebody could hurt this innocent little baby.
Yeah, the mask. We all call it the mask. Right. Because we all know how to pretend. We've had to pretend all of our life. From a child, the secret, we weren't allowed to tell the secret, we weren't allowed to tell anyone. So when you keep that, I was married and my husband I never told. I never told it until I was probably 30-some years old. Having to take off the mask is what you call the mask or mask. It's hard then. It's hard.
You have to actually deal with. Okay, sexual abuse. Fantastic. That's what it was.
As far as how I felt then, I was so young and I guess naive to an extent when I was 7. It took me a few years to realize what had actually happened, what it was, and that it had a name. And it was then that, it dawned on me, we'd start talking about that stuff at school. I was like 11 years old. And they started talking about that stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's what that was. And then I'm like, oh, well, okay, I'll tell my mom and dad like I'm supposed to. And when everything went down, and told my mom and dad, and we went to our pastor, and we were told to forgive and forget and move on. It made me feel like there was something really wrong with me for being upset and angry, and made me a bad Christian. So it messed with me on all sorts of different levels on that aspect. So yes, the abuse itself, the actual incidents were one thing, but how things were handled after, I think, were just as bad, if not worse, because how it affected me. Now, as an adult, I don't. I still struggle with self-worth. I still struggle with confidence, and I don't. It takes a lot for me to have confidence in myself.
The way it made me feel at that point was that I wasn't really worth a lot to him or to anybody else. And then when my dad started molesting me, well, we had the one incident when I was 12, then it just kind of ingrained it in me that maybe I really wasn't worth much. Because if my own dad can do it, if my babysitter's husband can do it for so long, what does that say about me? So, confidence is gone. I have wanted to go into, I've been in and out of college so much, there was a point where I wanted to start all over again and do the sciences and stuff after I started with the group, because I was like, maybe I do have that confidence. Maybe I can, do sciences. I mean, even something as little as math and science, I didn't have the confidence in myself to do it. Over, something that happened years and years and years ago, it still gave me that lack of self-esteem, that lack of self-confidence of knowing that, there are problems in life that I could help, I could do, but I just didn't have that self-worth in my mind to actually go ahead and go forward with it.
It would have been when he was abusing me, that he would tell me that he was doing this for my own good, to teach me when I got married.
For myself, unfortunately, mine would be during the abuse, because it happens so often every day that there was one particular day that it was happening, and I was being held on top of him, and when I looked down, he was smiling up at me. And it just kind of let me know that I didn't really have a say at that point. It was just happening, and he knew exactly what he was doing.
What has been the most helpful thing that you have done that has taken you out of that victim mentality?
To whoever would hear me, hear my story, and then that's when I was able to start healing, to help others, to talk to them, tell them what had happened, and maybe it would, trigger something in them to maybe help them with what happened.
I started going to therapy and coming to the survivors group and stuff. So, yeah.
And unfortunately, but fortunately they have medication that I am on, and it helps me tremendously. And if you ask Brad, he says that I'm a different person on that medication. We've been together 10 years. We will be getting married in September.